وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألا بذكر الله تطمئن القلوب وقال جل وعلا في مقام آخر يا أيها الذين آمنوا اذكروا الله ذكرا كثيرا وسبحوه بكرة وأصيلا وقال جل وعلا في مقام آخر فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون صدق الله العظيم إن الله ملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما الله رب محمد صلى عليه وسلم نحن عباد محمد صلى عليه وسلم صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا حبيبي يا رسول الله. In the previous chapter of this kitab, Lawaqihul Anwar Al-Qudsiyya, we learnt about the importance of doing the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, chanting the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dhikr of Allah bil lisan wa dhikr of Allah bil qalb, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala verbally and with your heart. And we mentioned to you last week the two types of dhikr. Last week as in the last verse. Let me just correct that. Dhikr bil jahr and dhikr bil khifa. Khafa, yani dhikr khafi and dhikr jali. When you do dhikr verbally aloud, which is when a murid is initiated in the path of suluk, he is instructed initially to do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aloud, because he cannot withstand the jalli, that manifestation which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestows on him, casts upon him whilst he is doing dhikr. He will have to shout. It's like you're shrieking. There is a pain within you, and this is the praiseworthy commended pain within you, the pain of being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why you're yelling, you're shouting, you're screaming. But thereafter, once he has been instructed to tread this path of suluk through dhikr bil jahr, then he is initiated and instructed in the riyam where he does dhikr bil sir, silent dhikr. And I told you one method from the many methods of doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You remember one thing, there's many types or many forms of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who struggle in our path, we will guide them unto our paths. Subul is the plural of sabil. So there's not only one type of way of going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are many different ways of going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I mean going to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remember this is a spiritual journey. Okay? Every day of a Muslim should bring him closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not away from him. And we can all do that by clinging unto the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One form of ibadah, greatest form of ibadah, in fact, greatest form of dhikr rather, is salah, namaz. From when you say Allahu Akbar till Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, this is a complete, you can say, manifestation of dhikr of Allah from the beginning to the end. You are in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then obviously again you can also do verbal dhikr, which Imam Sha'rani rahmatullah had emphasized in many passages in this covenant, as we shall hear again inshallah. So he continues saying, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وكذلك ينبغي لنا أن نحث المترددين إلينا على حضور مجالس الذكر ونحارب من سعى في إبطال مجلس ذكر ونجادله ونباحثه. It is also recommended that we incite those people who are our close friends, those who sit in our company, those who are always with us. We incite them to attend gatherings of the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As I told you before, ilm, knowledge is very dry. For example, if we do a dars on Masla Masail, it's a very dry subject. And it's very heavy on the heart and the mind as well. Dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very light on the tongue, and it is also purifying your heart at the same time, making your heart light, making your ruh subtle. So then he says, we also are recommended to fight against those people. This is not the physical fight, obviously. Mujadala, this is mubahada, debate. Okay, rationally, logically, through knowledge, debate people who strive to obliterate and eradicate and to label majalis dhikr as bid'ah and shirk. This is a simplified translation of what he said. In this day and age, there are many people who, when you sit down to do the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to purify your heart, you say Allah, 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 they say this is shirk, this is bid'ah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, O you who believe, اذكروا الله ذكرا كثيرا. Remember Allah abundantly. Chant His name abundantly. So we should debate with them. Now there's two types of people he mentions here. One are those who are completely engaged in dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the masjid. One who are engaged in learning the sacred knowledge. Both are praiseworthy. Remember that hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where there were two gatherings in his masjid, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, both are praiseworthy, both are commended in the sight of Allah, and then he himself sat in the gathering of the sacred knowledge. To emphasize, obviously, knowledge. But at the same time, remember one thing. Knowledge and dhikr have to be together. Knowledge and tasawwuf have to be together. Learning the sacred knowledge, aspiring for the sacred knowledge, acquiring the sacred knowledge and equipping yourself with ilm deen has to be coupled with dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I will give you a statement which I said to you before of Imam Malik radiallahu ta'ala, Imam Dar al-Hijra, Imam al-Madinah al-Munawwara. He said, Man tafaqqaha wa lam yatasawwaf faqad tafassaqa. Whoever acquired knowledge, yet he did not practice tasawwuf, purity of the heart, then he has transgressed. He's become a heretic. وَمَنْ تَصَوَّفَ وَلَمْ يَتَفَقَّهْ فَقَدْ تَزَنْدَقَ. As regards those people who have jumped into the path of suluk without having gained the basic knowledge of the deen, without gaining knowledge of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فَقَدْ تَزَنْدَقَ, they have become heretics, which is worse. And then he says at the end, وَمَنْ جَمَعَ بَيْنَهُمَا فَقَدْ تَحَقَّقَ. Whoever combines both knowledge and dhikr, knowledge and tasawwuf together, knowledge and purity of the heart, he has established the reality within his heart. He has reached the reality. So he says here, فإن ظهر الحق على يديه أيدناه وقاتلنا معه وذلك لأن غالب من يعقد مجالس الذكر في المساجد يدخله الدخيل من حب الرياء والسمعة والشهرة. He says, as regards those people who are from the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, obviously, but they have a valid reason in order to reform how people establish dhikr. He says here, how do you reform people who do dhikr? Let them purify their intentions. He says here, because many people who sit down to the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, illa mashallah, there are obviously exceptions, they don't have a purity of intention. They want people to hear. They have pretense. They're doing it to show off. And he says an example, لا سيما في مثل جامع الأزهر, especially in a huge mosque like Al-Azhar. You've seen Al-Azhar mosque, have you? You have. Sorry, you have. Have you? A grand mosque. And if you are initiating dhikr, if you are in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, majaz dhikr, you say, oh mashallah, look at that person in this grand mosque doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People will come, people will show. People will say, point fingers to you and say, mashallah, look at him. كَفَى بِالْمَرْءِ فِتْنَةً أَن تُشَارَ إِلَيْهِ بِالْبُنَانِ. It is enough for a person to be left in tribulations that people point to him with fingers. Look at him, mashallah. Look at that person of knowledge. And the Prophet ﷺ said, those people who are close in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those, when they are hidden, when they are missing, people don't ask about them. If, for example, the Imam's missing, or not attended one namaz, people say, where's he gone, where's he gone, where's he gone? Probably gone to a khatam. This is widespread in this day and age. But this is it. Dhikr of Allah subhanahu should be done with ikhlas. So then he says, وَقَدْ وَقَعَ لِلْجُنَيْدِ أَنَّ الْإِمَامَ أَحْمَدَ بْنُ سُلَيْجٍ قَالَ لَهُ. Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi radiallahu ta'ala, one of the great awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you know how he became a great wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He was a wrestler. He had a very strong physique. He was very strong. He was a wrestler of Baghdad, the greatest wrestler of Iraq radiallahu ta'ala. And it so happened that they used to have a fair, they used to have a huge publicity of wrestling matches in the open. People could attend. There's no tickets to buy, obviously, free, off charge, to see this entertainment. And Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi was the undefeated, invincible wrestler, the champion in his age. So what happened was, one day there was a very poor, destitute Sayyid from the Ahl Bayt of the Prophet ﷺ. He once challenged Hazrat Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi, I want to wrestle with you. Hazrat Junayd al-Baghdadi accepted it, and he said, this is an easy component. This is an easy opponent. Apologies. I'll defeat him. He's very thin. So the public were there, and all of them came, spectators, people came in order to obviously take the mickey out of the opponent, na'udhu billah, thinking what kind of match this will be. But before the match started, the Sayyid, he whispered in the ear of Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi that I am the Ahl Bayt of the Prophet, I am from the progeny of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, make me win, so that at the end the reward I can have, and then I can feed my family, I can have a better living. So Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi, though he had not yet been initiated in the path of suluk, when he heard this, when the wrestling started, he made himself fall onto the ground, and the Sayyid was on his chest. They said rematch, we need a rematch. So they had a rematch again, and they wrestled. Hazrat Junayd al-Baghdadi then made himself fall onto the ground, and the Sayyid was on him. The third time they said, we need a rematch. This is absolutely bizarre, peculiar. This is completely strange, astonishing. The undefeated champion of his age, the Hulk Hogan of his age, Allahu Akbar, is being defeated by someone who is less than half his size. And third time they had a rematch, and again Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi, he made himself fall onto the ground. Out of the love of a Sayyid, out of the love of someone who is from the progeny of the Prophet ﷺ, the Sayyid went with all the money to have a better living. The same night, Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi he saw in a dream, and he heard someone saying in the dream, saying to him, today you took care and consideration of someone who was from the family of my beloved, O Junayd, we have made you from our beloveds. And he became Imam al-Ta'ifa, the greatest Imam of the awliya, where all the Salasil meet is Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi radiallahu ta'ala. So he says about Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi radiallahu ta'ala that obviously he used to conduct majalis al-dhikr in the masjid. Obviously at times where it wouldn't be problematic to people who would be reciting the Quran or be doing their own dhikr, because you should not do dhikr aloud where people are reciting the Quran, or where people are studying the sacred knowledge, or people are praying salah. It may disturb them. Imam Ahmad ibn Suraj, however, he was conducting majalithul ilm. He would be disseminating the sacred knowledge. So once Imam Ahmad said to Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi, he said, إِنَّ رَفْعَ أَصْوَاتِكُمْ بِالذِّكْرِ يُؤْذِي حَلَقَتَنَا فِي الْعِلْمِ. Sorry. That your raising of the voice in dhikr, it disturbs our gathering of knowledge. فقال له ينبغي مراعاة أقرب الطريقين إلى الله سبحانه وتعالى. So Imam Junayd al-Baghdadi said to him, okay, but we should find the easiest, the shortest route to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are studying sacred knowledge, which is fine, which is good. We are doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu, which is also praiseworthy. But we should find which is the shortest route to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when I say ilm here, I do not undermine the basic faraid knowledge. Without any doubt whatsoever, when you for example hear the virtues of dhikr of Allah subhanahu, don't just think that you can then isolate yourself in the mountains and the caves, Torah Bora mountains, the K2 mountains, and then just do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without learning sacred knowledge. At the end, he does emphasize that you have to first of all learn the fara'id, which is very important. Wudu, tahara, salah, zakah, hajj, and so forth. When things become a responsibility upon you, the adab and the ibadat which become a responsibility upon you, you have to have the knowledge of them. This is the least. Thereafter, obviously, you have a choice, whether to expand your knowledge or so forth. So then Imam Ahmad ibn Suraj radiallahu ta'ala said to him, فَإِذَنْ وَجَبَ مُرَاعَاتُ طَرِيقَتِنَا لِأَنَّهَا أَقْرَبُ إِلَى اللَّهِ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى مِنْ طَرِيقِكُمْ. Imam Ahmad ibn Suraj said, okay, you asked me a question, which is the shortest route? I'm telling you the shortest route is learn sacred knowledge. Learn the deen. فَقَالَ الْجُنَيْدُ وَمَا عِلَاقَةُ الْقُرْبِ. Because that's the closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Junayd then cross-questioned him. What do you define by being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How do you define it? So he said, Ibn Suraj said, أَن يَكُونَ الْغَالِبُ عَلَيْهِ شُهُودُ الْحَقِّ. That he always witnesses Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is always God conscious. فَقَالَ الْجُنَيْدُ هَذَا عَلَيْكُمْ لَا لَكُمْ. When you learn the sacred knowledge, this will be against you, not for you, because لأن الغالب عليكم إنما هو شهود أحكام دين الله لله. Because when you are studying the books, you are reading the masail, but you are not going to the objective, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they did the test. فقال ابن سريج نريد حالة يقع الامتحان بها. Let's test one another. Let's test your party, your group. Let's test our group. فقال الجنيد يا فلان خذ هذا الحجر وألقه في حضرة هؤلاء الفقراء. So what they did, Imam Junayd al-Qadiri radiallahu ta'ala summoned one person and he told him, take this stone and throw it in the people, in the fuqara who are sat doing the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's see what their reaction is. Do they swear? Do they become angry? What is the first reaction that they have? So the man just went, anonymous man, and he threw stones at them. فَصَاحُوا كُلُّهُمْ اللَّهِ. Every single one of them, they didn't say, what are you doing? They said, Allah. This was their first immediate reaction. ثم قال له خذ هذا الحجر وألقه بين هؤلاء الذين يطالعون في العلم. Then he summoned that man again and he gave him another stone and he said, throw this in the gathering of people who are sat there learning the sacred knowledge, studying books. فألقاه. So he threw it. فقال له حرام عليك. He said, it's haram on you. What are you doing? It's impermissible for you to do this. You're disturbing us. فقال ابن سريج الحق معك يا أبا القاسم. Ibn Suraj then had to testify and then had to confess that haqq is true and reality is with you, O Imam Junayd al-Qadiri, that the essence of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes a person God conscious. As soon as that stone was thrown, they didn't swear at him, they didn't rebuke him, they said Allah. Because with them, the first one is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are God conscious. وسمعت سيد علي الخواس رحمه الله تعالى يقول من علامة ترجيح ذكر الله تعالى على قراءة العلم ثقل العلم على لسان الإنسان وهو يطالع في الروح وخفة ذكر الله تعالى. One of the reasons, signs that dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater than supererogatory learning of the sacred knowledge. Dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater than knowledge, I mean after the fara'id, the extra knowledge, is because knowledge is very burdensome upon the tongue and is very burdensome upon your ruh. Students who are learning sacred knowledge, give them a book of Arabic grammar, for example, a book of fiqh, masala. It's very dry, it's very burdensome. وَخِفَّةُ ذِكْرِ اللَّهِ. But dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very light on the tongue. Subhanallah. There's a hadith in Bukhari Sharif, the Prophet ﷺ said, كَلِمَتَانِ حَبِيبَتَانِ إِلَى الرَّحْمَنِ خَفِيفَتَانِ عَلَى اللِّسَانِ ثقيلتان في الميزان سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله العظيم. The final hadith in Bukhari Sharif. Two words which are the most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, very light on the tongue, yet very heavy on the scales on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Subhanallah wa bihamdi, subhanallah al-azim. These are very light words. Dhikr of Allah is very light. Allah, Allah, Allah. A very beautiful word. Allah, the lam in itself, is a very khafif letter, which is very easy to pronounce. Even babies say la 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 la. I think they say mam mam or la la la. What was it? They say la Allah, don't they? Ji, mashallah. الله أكبر. فإن المشرف على الانتقال من هذه الدار يجب عليه استغنام وهو الأفضل. So a person who is about to leave this world, he should take benefit from things which are most beneficial to him. ذكر of Allah سبحانه وتعالى. فلو كان تعلم مسائل الفقه والنحو والأصول أفضل لما ثقلت على لسان المحتضر. If seeking knowledge like fiqh and nahv and grammar and usul was greater than dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it would not be burdensome upon the person who is in the brink of death. On the brink of death, the only thing that is on the tongue of a person is Allah, Allah, la ilaha illallah. Inshallah, we will have the kalima on our tongues. We don't learn rules of al-kalimatu lafdun ghudila ma'ala mufradin mufradun mufradan, whatever. It's la ilaha illallah at the end. Subhanallah. And what happens? Subhanallah. What happens to people who go against dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? He says, Allahu Akbar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects us from pointing fingers at people who are engaged in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah make us from dhakirin Allah kathiran wa dhakirat. From those about whom the Prophet said, do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until the munafiqeen say you are doing it out of riyah. In another hadith, the Prophet said, do as much dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, udhkurullah dhikran, until people say you've become majnoon, pagal. Insane in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Intoxicated in the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وأخبرني الشيخ أحمد الضرير المقيم في منية الخنازير بالشرقية. Sheikh Ahmad Darir informed me, Sheikh Sha'rani, he informed Imam Sha'rani رضي الله تعالى عنه. قال جاورت عند الشيخ عمر روشني شيخ الشيخ دمرداش بمصر. I was once with Sheikh Umar رضي الله تعالى عنه, Sheikh Umar Roshni رضي الله تعالى عنه. وكان في مدينة توريز العجم, and he was in a city called Torres. And the shakhsan, not Torres, obviously, this is something else. أن شخص من علماء توريز اسمه ملا عبد اللطيف كبير المفتيين بها ساعات إبطال مجلس الذكر المتعلق بالشيخ عمر في الجامع الكبير. One great mufti, grand mufti of that city called Mulla Abdul Latif, he strived his best in order to obliterate, in order to nullify, in order to stop Shaykh Umar radiallahu ta'ala doing dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Grand Mosque. And how many people were, and what did he say, what did the Mufti say to that Shaykh Umar? He said, إِنَّ الْمَسْجِدَ إِنَّمَا جُعِلَ بِالْأَصَالَةِ لِلصَّلَاةِ. Masjids by their essence, by their virtue, by their originality have been made for salah and nothing else. وَكَانَ يَحْضُرُ ذَلِكَ الْمَجْلِسِ نَحْوُ 5,000 نَفْسٍ. And in that mahfil dhikr, in that masjid, there would be 5,000 people who would attend every single day. 5,000 people. To attend the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Mufti said, what? Stop it. Because these are the mosques of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for namaz only. Don't introduce these bid'at and innovations. Astaghfirullah. فقال الشيخ عمر فإذا ذكرنا بخفض الصوت تمنعنا من ذلك. Shaykh Umar then told him, if we do silent dhikr within ourselves, will you stop us then? فقال لا. He said, no, I won't stop you then. You do the silent dhikr, that's no problem. فقال الشيخ عمر. Shaykh Umar then said to his students, to his disciples, to the people who attended, the 5,000 people who attended dhikr, يا معاشر الفقراء اخفضوا أصواتكم في الذكر ومن قوي عليه وارد برفع الصوت فليرده ويكتمه ما استطاع. He's told every single person, as I told you before, when you do dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's jalali, it's powerful, it's intense, it's very strong, and therefore that's why you need to scream initially, shout Allah, Allah. You can't withstand the tajalli. Okay? But now, because the Mufti said you need to do the silent dhikr, the leader, Shaykh Umar, told all the people, do silent dhikr. And if you get a manifestation of Allah, if you intensify, your ruh intensifies, control it. Don't shout. Withstand it. Withhold the intensity of the dhikr within yourself. Don't shout. Which is very hard. فَفَعَلُوا, they all did that. What happened? فَحُمِلَ مِنَ الْمَجْلِسِ ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ نَحْوُ 500 نَفْسٍ مَرْضَى. 500 people were taken from that majlis, who were all taken as ill. They became ill because they could not withstand the tajalli of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَاحْتَرَقَتْ أَكْبَادُ نَحْوِ 14 نَفْسًا. 14 people died in that majlis. Their livers had burnt, literally burnt. Not metaphorically, literally. And he says why it's literally. قال الشيخ أحمد فحسست بيدي على أكبادهم فوجدتها مشوية محروقة تفتتت كالكبد المشوي على الجمر. I put my hand near their livers on their body, and it was burning like liver, like meat that is put on a grill that is cooked. That was burning inside because they could not withstand it. That's why there was the need for them to shout Allah out with jahr and not with sir, because with sir it is more intense. Allahu Akbar. So because of that mufti, what happened? 14 people martyred, 500 people were taken as ill. Allahu Akbar. فأرسل الشيخ عمر إلى ملا عبد اللطيف وجماعته. Shaykh Umar then sent a message to Mullah Abdul Latif and said to him, هل يقول عاقل إن مثل هؤلاء الذين ماتوا لهم تفعل في الموت ولكن سهم الله تعالى في البعيد. Do you think that these people reacted, they just pretended to die? By Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it was because you had restricted them to shout the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they could not withstand the tajalli of Allah within them, that they had all passed away. It is because of you. And then what happened? As a punishment, what happened? قال الشيخ أحمد, the narrator then says, فتطبقت دار ملا عبد اللطيف تلك الليلة عليه وعلى أولاده وعياله وبهائمه وغلمانه فلم يسلم أحد منه وماتوا أجمعين وكان يوم مشهور في توريس. The person who had gone against the dhikr of Allah and told them to restrict themselves, to do it silently, his own house collapsed on him whilst he was inside, his family was inside, his children were inside, the stable and everything, all his animals, they were all destroyed that day. Because he stopped people from doing the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? The power of dhikr is immense. Okay? And as Imam Sha'rani says later on, inshallah we should stop here. As Imam Sha'rani says later on, the only time where you get the benefit of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when you do it abundantly. Abundance of dhikr, daily dhikr. Make it your routine to chant the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا. Allah has 99 beautiful names. Obviously more than that, but those that are mentioned in authentic, in the verses of the Quran or authentic hadith, 99. Chant them, you will get the benefit, inshallah. Okay? Ya Allah, person for example who says Ya Allah every single day 1,000 times, his yaqeen and certitude and certainty will increase. He will have yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when you have yaqeen in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you don't need to worry about anything else, because you know there is the Creator who is watching over you, who will take care of all your matters and affairs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yaqeen. So chant the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you will see the benefit. Your heart will find tranquil and peace. Your mind will be very light and burdens, and will be alleviated from all the burden, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give me an abundant tawfiq to do an abundance of dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all give us the benefit and the fragrance of uniting in Him, uniting with Him Azza wa Jal through His dhikr, inshaAllah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Maulana Muhammad ma'adin judi wal karami wa alihi wa sahbihi wa barik wa sallim. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا من فضلك علما يقربنا منك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم آت نفوسنا تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها أنت وليها ومولاها فاغفر لها. اللهم إنا نعوذ بك من علم لا ينفع ومن قلب لا يخشع ومن نفس لا تشبع ومن دعوة لا يستجاب لها اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. اللهم أعنا على ذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم، وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وطب القلوب ودوائها وعافية الأبدان وشفائها ونور الأبصار وضيائها وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.